If you want to know what comps to play in set 14, patch 14.1, this is going to be the video for you. We're going to be going over a lot of strong compositions. I think we have like 15 of them or something like that. There's a lot going on, so I'm going to be updating this tier list every single day for the next like week or two, whether it's adding new comps, changing the order, or changing a couple of units in the comp, because right now at the beginning of every set, so many things are going on, so many things are changing, so many little optimizations can be found and had. So let's just get right into the video. In the tier list we have in the S tier right now, I think vertical traits work really well in the early parts of sets because they are the easier comps to play. So if you ever get an emblem for Street Demon or Anima Squad, just go for it. It's going to be a very strong comp no matter what you do. And they have a lot of reliable carries at different cost levels, which is really nice. After that, I'd say one of the more consistent comps right now is Strategist Flex. Some people call this the anti-strategist comp. Some people call this a Ziggs comp, and you could even combine it with Street Demon, because Street Demon you could flex into that because they run 4 strategists as well. So lots of options here with Strategist Flex, probably the most consistent way to play right now. After that, we have one reroll comp in the S tier. I think Vayne is super duper strong. After that, in the A tier, it's like a step down. A lot of these comps are still very good. That's why I include them. There's always spots for different comps in case you are new to the tier list. But in the A tier, we have Vanguard, Marksman, Aphelios, Divinicorp, Twisted Fate Reroll, Nitro, Jhin, really fun comp because you get the robot. Shaco Reroll, another great reroll comp that's fun to play because you get to stack up your Shaco. Executioner Reroll, Dynamo Misfortune, probably one of my favorite comps right now just because I like Misfortune pretty much every set that she's in. There's Seraphine Techie Reroll, great beginner comp there. Exotech, and then Zeri Bastion to round it all out. I'd say right now, in terms of forecast carries, like all the AP carries are pretty good. The AD carries are pretty decent, but Zeri I think is slightly worse than like Aphelios and Xayah based on their builds. But let's go into how to play each and every one of these comps. I do have comps that I plan on adding later on, so definitely look out for that in the future on bunnymuffins.lol/meta. This is the longest running player run tier list, and this website is over 5 years old now. So let's start off with Street Demon. Street Demon is again a vertical comp. Vertical, in case you're confused with the terminology, it just means going really deep into a certain trait. So for example, if you go like 7 units into a trait deep, that's considered a vertical. Anything 6+, I'd consider a vertical, or at least going into like the later tiers, right? Because you need a lot of units. Most of your units are going to be contributing to that. So the base of this comp is going to be Brand and Nico in the mid game, and then Samira in the late game. Very strong comp. I played it in my beginner guide, and it was really fun to play because you have a lot of item holders. The comp just makes a lot of sense. So if we look at it from afar, Street Demons have built-in strategists already. So if we take out like Ziggs and take out Nico, and we're left with like only Street Demons out there. So what we have is 7 Street Demon with 2 strategists and 2 techies, because both Echo and Nico are strategists, and then Brand and Zyra are techie. So the choice is you either go into 2 more strategists or 2 more techies. But the great thing about adding in strategists is that you get Yuumi, who's an AMP, and Samira is also an AMP. So you just get like a free synergy there if you add in a strategist. So it just goes really easily to add in like Yuumi and then something like a Ziggs just to get the bonus up. But honestly, instead of Ziggs, you could run like any legendary unit. If you want to run like God of the Net with Garen, people love doing that. If you don't have room for both of them, like Garen's gonna be a very fine choice so that you get an extra trait modification. So there's a lot of units you could sub in and out for this team. If we take out Garen, like you could add in a Bruiser such as like Kabuko. Legendary units are always very nice. And there are a lot of different options you could kind of tech in. Pretty much if there's a 5-cost legendary unit that has one of these traits, you can find a way to play it. But for me, I like this base here with the 3 strategists, Yuumi to provide AMP for Samira, and then 4 strategists is just like a pretty big upgrade. It makes your frontliners more durable and your backliners deal a bit more damage, so it's a way to buff up Brand and Samira even more. But honestly, the choices are yours depending on what you hit. But here we have Nico as main tank. You just want generic tank items on Nico. You don't need Ionic Spark if you have like a static Shiv in the backline, or you don't even need it at all because you have mixed damage on this team, both Samira and Brand. One of them does attack damage, one of them does magic damage. I do like having some sort of anti-heal on this team, so I like putting Morello or red buff on Brand, but you could also put a Sunfire Cape on your Nico if you don't have that. And then for Samira, just like the classic attack damage items will do, some people like putting healing items on their Samira. The reason why is because sometimes she jumps in and plays a little risky for my taste, so putting a Hand of Justice on her is perfectly reasonable, but she does have some built-in lifesteal or Omnivamp anyways, so sometimes it's not necessary. I have not experimented with this yet, but I'm sure there might be some tech where maybe you put her in the front 2 rows to get the Strategist bonus of getting the durability. I think the damage amp's probably going to be a bit better, but you know, if she's dying a lot, it's something to consider. Next up for augments, like obviously all the Street Demon trait based augments are going to be really good there. Other things that are good is like mana flow, because you have like a Shojin, so anything that gives mana to Brand is pretty nice. You already have damage amp from Strategist, and you also get AP and AD from Street Demon, so you don't really need any specific combat augments. So maybe some econ augments would work pretty well, because you are going for a pretty expensive comp. What are econ augments? There's so many to list. Like from the prismatics, you have stuff like dual purpose, invested could kind of help you out. I don't really like invested that much, but it does have its time and place. You could go for subscription service if you get the forecast early, though I think that one's not really that necessary. Upward mobility is pretty good. Wise spending, pretty much anything that gives you like level up, anything that gives you bonus XP is pretty nice. For the calculated loss could help. Epic could help, Slammin' could help. A lot of different things can give you econ, which is pretty nice, or like free experience. So that's what you typically would go for in a Street Demon build, either the trait or the econ, and then after that maybe get some items. I don't really think you need that many combat buffs, because you already get AP and damage amp. I guess you could build like crit or something. If you get like Piercing Lotus, that could be pretty useful. But all in all, very solid build out there right now. Works best if you have a +1 Street Demon. That way you don't have to rely on getting a Street Demon later on, or you don't have to like play a Mundo in the late game. And then like many items is pretty nice, because you have a lot of units to itemize. Nico, Samira, and Brand are going to be the main focus, but then Ziggs could also hold items, or whatever random legendary you play. So sometimes you might want to build a Thieves Glove on them. But I do have item priorities down here on the website, bunnymuffins.lol/meta, in case you want to know more. Well, let's move on into the next composition, which is going to be Anima Squad, another vertical trait comp. And this one's focused around Anima instead of Street Demons. So Anima's pretty interesting. Pretty much you pick an upgrade every time you reach an Anima threshold. And typically I've been taking the physical damage ones, but I haven't really noticed too much a difference between taking the physical versus magic damage choices in Anima Squad. I'm sure as I play the comp more, I'll figure it out a little bit better. But normally when I play around Aurora, I want the magic ones. When I play around Xayah, I want the physical ones. So I guess if you're going for a win, go for Aurora, go for the magic damage ones. If you're going for like a top 4, Xayah is going to be more reliable with the AD. But ideally you play both of them. But when you're making your selections earlier on in the game, I normally take the physical ones just to guarantee playing around Xayah. But if you know you're going to the super late game, then take the magic damage ones. That's my rule of thumb that I'm using right now. Feel free to let me know what you all come up with in the comments down below. But this comp plays very similarly to the previous one. You have 2 4-cost units that you play around. One's a tank, one's a carry. Generic tank items on the tank, and then some AD damage items on the carry. And then for your legendary, you could use that to kind of cap your team off. Like Aurora works in a very weird way. She pulls a unit in, so what I recommend is putting a Sejuani on the left side of your bench. That way you pull in a unit that has a lot of crowd control and provides a lot of utility to your team. And I also like having like Spirit Shojin and Morello on Aurora. I think she is one of the best users of Morello in the entire set, as she hits like a ton of people every time she casts. Another thing people like to do, I personally like Nashers too, to keep applying the Morellonomicon often, but another option is going to be an Archangel staff on Aurora, because she goes to the safety of their bench, so she has a lot of time to stack up Archangel stacks. It kind of depends on what you're going for. If you need more damage or utility, that's where I choose between the Nashers and the Archangel staff. For Leona, just any generic tank items work. By the way, in case you were wondering, if you ever wanted to know like certain item substitutions, scroll down to the Explorer section and click the link there, and you'll pretty much be taken to a data site that has all the information you could ever hope for, and you can click on like items, and then you could like add champions in. So we want like Leona, we want Xayah, and we want Aurora. And after we add them in, we could look at some item options for them. So for example, we could turn on champion specific stats there, and then we could type in like Leona and see what other options are out there. So you average like a 3.28, and pretty much every tank item is within that realm. So pretty much you could build any tank item on her. You just want to build it as fast as possible. That way you get a ton of value on her. And like, yeah, any generic tank items work on her, which is really great. We could look at Aurora and compare how the Archangel staff does versus the other stuff. And like, again, pretty much everything's really good. I like Morello the most because I think she applies it so well. If I have a 1-star Aurora, I'd definitely prioritize the Morello. If I have a 2-star, maybe I go for an Archangel and Jeweled Gauntlet build, you know? It really depends on what the state of the game is at, because itemizing a 1-star legendary is a bit different than itemizing a 2-star legendary. Let's talk about Xayah though for itemization. She really likes Spear of Shojin, and then just generic attack damage items. The IE Last Whisper combo is a tried and true combo that has been used all the way since set 1, and you can't really go wrong with it. But she likes the Shojin, unlike other attack damage carries, because she is mainly a spellcaster rather than a auto attacker. Like, yeah, she still auto attacks a ton, but she's really reliant on her spell. That's why people love building Spear of Shojin on her. So we could check out like Xayah over here. And you can see like most popular item, no surprises, Infinity Edge, like Spear of Shojin's really good, Last Whisper's good. Rageblade is only built a lot because people build it for other comps and then they swap into this comp. So data can be a little bit deceptive. I'll come out with a data guide later to help everyone kind of navigate this a little bit better. But I'd say like any of the generic attack damage items after the Spear of Shojin is going to work, like IE, Last Whisper, Giant Slayer, Deathblade, Guardbreaker, even like Runons can probably work. They're all going to work fine and dandy on your Xayah. But that's pretty much all you need to know for itemization. As for like augments, I like having an econ augment or a +1 anima because it just helps you get to the 357 thresholds that much easier. And also like the econ is nice because you are playing for like 4 costs and legendary units. Similar to the other build before, you can also flex in some legendary units later on. If we click into the comp and then take out all the non-anima units, we have 2 slots available to us. So we do have Vanguard, so you could do like a 4 Vanguard build. That is very viable if you get like a +1 Vanguard emblem. So you could play like any of the other Vanguards to get to 4. I wouldn't recommend playing 4 Vanguard by like adding in 2 things, but if you have like nothing else to play in the early game, like yeah, sure, you could do it temporarily. But the real power comes in by flexing in the legendary units that we could fit with this team. So for me, I for sure want Dynamo if I'm running Aurora, and I think Jhin is the best person to kind of do that because it also gives you Marksman for your Xayah. So even though like Misfortune might be a more expensive unit, I think Jhin fits the build just like a slightly bit better because he's kind of like a 2-for-1, you know? And then after that, you just play any legendary unit that fits some of the things you have on the side. So that could be like a Strategist, you could play like a Nico or something if you want an extra tank. I think the best option here is going to be a Renekton with Bastion. He's just very reliable because he's like a 5-cost unit. He has great carry potential if you get him to 2-star, and you could throw some of the weird items you have on him. Like if you built an early Bloodthirster because you thought you were going something else, Renekton can use that. All the melee Bruiser items, he uses those really well. So that's what I kind of like about this comp. You can flex in a lot of different stuff. It's pretty much just like 7 Anima plus Jhin just to give a lot of bonuses to your team because he complements your 2 carries very well. So he's pretty much always played there. But let's go on into the next comp, which is Strategist Flex. Probably one of the most played comps of the patch right now. And there are a lot of different things you could do here. So there's 3 carry options. We have Ziggs, like you see in this build here. Let's look at the level 9 version, like 5 Strategists, 4 Cyber Boss, some Street Demons, and some Techies. After that, we have Annie. People like really playing 5 AMP with Strategists, and then Annie goes nuts with this double mana build, blue buff plus Shojin, and the Nashers, you just want her casting as much as possible. That's like by far her best build. And then you also have the Street Demon comp that we saw up here, which also uses 4 Strategists. So you have a lot of different options with the Strategist Flex comp. So if you're ever wondering how to play AP Flex, a lot of people, they played Black Rose in the previous set. This is gonna be the comp to do it with because you can flex between 3 different 4-cost units, and who knows, someone might even discover another way to play this build. Maybe there are even more carries you could kind of use, but essentially you do a fast 8, you roll down, you see which 4 costs you hit, and then you just play around that unit. It's as simple as that. So you build a Spear, Shojin, and AP items in the early game. If you hit Annie, you play Annie. If you hit Ziggs, you play Ziggs. If you hit Brand, you play Brand. So pretty simple, right? Then you just throw in some other strategist and whatever trait that your carry is using. So if you're doing Brand, you want to go Street Demon. If you're going Ziggs, you just want to play 5 strategists. If you're going Annie, you want to add in AMPs. The options are literally endless. Well, not really, there are 3 options, but compared to other TFT comps, that is pretty endless, right? The way you want to play this though is you want to play it from like a big econ spot or win streak. So you may have noticed already, a lot of the level 8 comps, you really want to play them when you're ahead in the game, just because they're a little bit expensive. But when you're playing a flex comp, you could afford to be a little less picky. You don't have to be like Mr. 100 or 90 plus health the whole game, just because you don't need to spend as much gold to stabilize because you are flexing between a few different comps. So that's one thing that's pretty important here. Another thing I like doing is making sure you have a Morello holder. I love Morello in this comp, and pretty much anyone can use it. You just put it on the carry that you care least about. So if you're doing a Ziggs primary carry, put the Morello on Brand. If you're doing a Brand primary carry, put it on Ziggs. Or like if you're doing Annie, put it on Ziggs. That way you could focus all the damage items on your primary carry and then have the utility items on your secondary. But overall, this is a very solid build. You could play this probably every game just because there's so many different options you could go for, and it's pretty fun to do. And as for augments, I prioritize econ augments, then I go for an item augment because you have a lot of different carries you could use, then trait is probably the least important there. But next up we have is going to be Vayne Reroll. This is going to be the first reroll comp that we are going to cover. I have like the level 7 and level 8 comp versions over here, but essentially it's just 4 Slayer, 4 Vanguard, Vayne in the back line, double Rageblade, plus a Runon's going to be really strong. If you can't get this exact item combo, I think it's pretty important to have this exact item combo. You could put in like a Hextech Gunblade to replace one of these. Hextech Gunblade just works really well with the Rageblade because it gets a lot of value because you get super stacked up, but mainly you don't want to deviate from the build too much. With that in mind, for augments, Anger Issues is really good because you get a lot of free Rageblades. Runon's Hurricane augment is really good. I think it's called like category 5 or something like that. It just makes the Runons go absolutely bonkers. And then you could also flex some other carries in this build. So you want to do a 2-cost reroll into a 3-cost reroll focused on Vayne first, then Jarvan later on. Zed could be a potential secondary carry once you get him to 2-star, or you could use Senna. I've seen some people do like a 3-star Senna build when they're rolling for Jarvan, but that doesn't happen all the time. You're gonna have to make that decision in your own game. Typically, when you play this comp, you don't have a lot of money because you're rolling for so many different things. So you typically stay level 7 towards the end of the game. But if you do manage to get to level 8, something useful to put in would be something like Renekton, add in more like Divinicorps or something like that, just to buff up your team a little bit further. But essentially, it's just Vayne primary carry, Jarvan main tank, Zed as a secondary carry. And if you cannot get Jarvan 3, because oftentimes people can't get Jarvan 3-star, you could always use a Leona 2-star as your tank. That works perfectly fine as well. I've seen some people do like Rhaast 3-star plus Vayne 3-star. I don't think that version's as strong. I think the Jarvan is a bit more reliable as a tank. But hey, if you get Rhaast 3-star for free and it allows you to power level after that, more power to you. Go ahead and use it and use Rhaast 3-star, put all the tank items on him, and then just super level up. Maybe you could get to like 6 Slayer at level 9. It's definitely possible. Also, if you get like +1 Slayer, at level 8, you don't want to run Renekton, just go 6 Slayer. You'll probably be more than happy with yourself. But that's pretty much how you play this comp. Like just 2-cost reroll, typical standard play. Nothing much has really changed too much from previous sets. You want to go to level 6 on 3-2, roll a bit for Vayne 2 and a 2-star tank. And then after that, you slow roll for Vayne 3, pick up all the other units along the way, go to level 7, get Jarvan 3, or go for Leona 2-star as your main tank. Again, for items like Rageblade's the name of the game, I put it in bold so people see it a little more clearly. Like every time I put an item in bold, it means it's like kind of mandatory, whereas the other item like Runons, it's like, I'd say it actually is kind of mandatory in this build, but like if you can't get it, like it's a lot of bows, right? It's less important than the other Rageblade. But let's move on into the A tiers, still very viable comps here. Let's start off with Aphelios, Vanguard, Marksman. This is a classic 4 DPS, 4 tank comp. These exist in every single set, and this is a popular version right now. The weird part about this comp is that it uses a lot of different item holders because like you have 3 4-cost units that you're focused on, so you always want enough items for all of them. And sadly enough, like Xayah and Aphelios, they don't really share items other than Infinity Edge and like Guardbreaker, because Aphelios really wants the Rageblade and Xayah really wants the Shojin. So unfortunately, it is a bit difficult to like spread the items out properly in the early game unless you just hit both of them 2-star, but like that doesn't always happen in all your games after stage 4. So that's why, again, with level 8 comps, you want to have a big econ lead, you want to have a health total lead, just so you can guarantee getting all of them to 2-star. Another thing that's useful is getting item augments so that you get additional items to make sure all 3 of these units have stuff on them. So while combat augments still help, I think getting 9 items total is going to be a bit more important, plus having an econ augment to help you get to this state in the game. This is a level 8 version we see here. It's just 4 Vanguard, 4 Marksman. You also mix in Anima Squad because Sylas kind of helps out with that. We have Golden Ox as well with Jarvan and Aphelios, so if you want to max out your Golden Ox, that is a possibility, though it's not like too important. And then after that, we have level 9 comp. You just added in an Aurora. That gives you Dynamo, which is pretty helpful, and she's also just like a overall solid unit. She could be your Morello applier if you do not have a Sunfire Cape yet, or you could always just build a Morello and then reforge the Sunfire Cape on Leona and get something else there. This is a very standard front to back comp because you just have 4 ranged DPS, 4 melee tanks, and this is just a set 14 version of some of those comps. Next build up we have is Divinicorp. So Divinicorp is a little bit weird. Sometimes people re-roll some Divinicorps. The version I've been seeing a lot is kind of like the 4-cost version though, where you play around Vex as the Executioner and Zed. And overall, it's just another fast 8 comp, but the weird part about this comp is that you don't really need tank items that much. I mean, they definitely do help, but you're more focused on getting perfect damage items for both Zed and Vex. So for Zed, you really want Edge of Night on him, you want Hand of Justice, and you want Infinity Edge. Another build for Zed possibly is Divinicorp Emblem. You could drop that on him, have the Edge of Night, and then build like a Bloodthirster. For Vex, she really likes blue buff, and then Rabadon's is pretty good because you don't get AP from other sources, so Rabadon's or Archangel are both really nice. I prefer Rabadon's though because you don't have a strong front line to stack up your Archangel, so that's why Rabadon's is a bit preferred here. And lastly, you have the Guard Breaker. It gives some additional crit, and overall Guard Breaker is just a really good item when you have built-in crit already. So if you have a Jeweled Gauntlet or Infinity Edge, you'll notice that a lot with different item carriers this set. They often build the Guard Breaker right now. But after you fill in the 6 Divinicorp, and obviously if you have the emblem, drop it on Zed, you'll get 7. You can fill the rest of the comp out with Urgot for Executioner, but he could be any Executioner. Kabuko could be any legendary tank instead. And you could also play like a random Bastion instead of Kabuko to kind of complement your Renekton. So lots of different options there. Pretty solid comp, focus around 4 costs again. Next build up we have is Syndicate, Reroll, Twisted Fate, and Darius, a very fun comp to play. Twisted Fate is probably one of my favorite units. Not in this set, but just in general in TFT, Twisted Fate I always found really cool. In this set, he works really well with Rageblade. So the double Rageblade, Hextech Gunblade build is really nice because he gets a lot of attack speed stacks, and then with his healing towards the late part of the fights, he just heals a lot. You know, it's kind of like it's like an infinite money glitch except for healing. But pretty much you just run 5 Syndicate, put the Fedoras on Darius and Twisted Fate because they're going to be your main tank and carry. And for Darius, just any generic tank items will do. If you do a 2-cost reroll, which you should for this comp, you could pick up Skarner if you want. You could also go for Braum instead. But if you have like a random 3-star, you could always just put a Thieves Glove on them and then they'll be doing just fine. But of course, like if you have super extra items, like just regular tank items will do. But pretty simple comp here. Double Rageblade is really strong and pretty much required. And only go for reroll comps if you have a lot of copies of the units you actually care about, because if not, your life is going to be pretty difficult. Next build up we have is Nitro Jhin reroll. Nitro works in a funny way because they don't actually buff up the units that are Nitro like this trait doesn't, and it instead builds up the robot or the T-Hex. And because of that, that means the carry of the Nitro comp is actually Jhin, who is not a Nitro. It's just funny how it works like that. He just has a lot of traits that overlap with this team. And you also want to find like low cost carries because you have a lot of 1 and 2 cost units that you need to 3-star. For example, Kindred, Nidalee, Shyvana, and Naafiri. They all power up the T-Hex based on their star level, so you really want them 3-star. So Starry Night, absolute like nuts augment on this comp, like almost a requirement. Maybe I should put it as a requirement just because it's that good, but any reroll augment will definitely be helpful. And then for Jhin, you want the Spear of Shojin and the Infinity Edge plus the Exotech item. I forgot what it is, like I have the name down here somewhere. Like Pulse Stabilizer is good, Hyperfang's good. Just put that on him. And if you get one that's for like a tank, like you could just drop it on like your Duani, for example. But the main tank is going to be Shyvana. I think the utility tank items is going to be pretty useful on her. The reason why you want the utility is because your main carries are going to be Jhin and the T-Hex. So you want to provide utility for them to kind of pop off. But the weird part about this build is if you get the 3-star Kindred and Nidalee, great. Go ahead and upgrade them, but you mainly focus on the 2-cost reroll because getting 3-star Shyvana and Jhin is more important than getting all the 1-cost, but you definitely keep them on your bench if possible. That's why when you play Nitro reroll, you want to get a lot of Nitros at the start so you don't have to roll for them that hard, and that way you can find them on level 6 instead of not finding them at all. Next build up we have is going to be Shaco Reroll. Very, very fun comp because Shaco's a stacking champion. They always have like one stacking champion every single set, which is kind of fun and nice. I like playing those a lot just because if you get one early, you could get like a crazy guy later on. For items for Shaco, you gotta go with the Infinity Edge, Hand of Justice combo with an Edge of Night. It's just one of the best like attack damage melee carry item combinations in the game. Edge of Night's really good because it's just really good survivability, and then if they rely on their spell, Infinity Edge is always nice, and then Hand of Justice is a great healing item to complement that with because you get the bonus crit. But to play this comp, you generally complement it with 4 Slayer. You get up to 6 Slayer once you get to level 8. But to do that, you focus on like the level 6 first because it is a 1-cost reroll after all. We have Mundo as a viable option there because he's a Slayer and like a tanky unit, so you can put the utility items on him. Even Shroud, Sunfire Cape, Redemption, all very nice. If you don't get Mundo though, because you really just care about Shaco, you could always make someone else a tank. It could be like Jarvan, Braum, or Darius, and then you could even add in Zed as a secondary carry later on. Some people like Senna, some people like adding in Vayne. I think Zed's the best one, but if you get a 3-star Senna or Vayne, then they're going to be better than the Zed. But it also depends on what items you have. But this is just a typical Slayer build for Shaco. Oh, and by the way, this comp works much better with artifact items. Like we have them listed out down here. Prowler's Claw, Spectral Cutlass, Death's Defiance, Silvermere Dawn, all really good stuff. You could also use like Gold Collector or Trinity Force. But the way to play 1-cost reroll is to not level or roll early on, and then on stage 3-1, when you're level 4, roll down to 30 or 32 gold, pick up your units. If you have 7 or more copies, roll further for Shaco, like just roll 10, see if you get another Shaco. If you do, roll another 10. If not, econ back up and slow roll at level 5 every single turn until you hit Shaco 3-star, or until stage 4-1 where you will roll until you hit. After that, you power level and add in 6 Slayer or 5 Syndicate, depending on what you get that game. Like if you have a 3-star Darius, like you could go for 5 Syndicate, do Syndicate, Shaco, and Darius. Both versions are viable, but it kind of depends on what you hit that game. I think the Slayer version is a bit more reliable, at least right now. Next up we have is Executioner Reroll. This is going to be a weird comp because there's so many different carries you could use. You have Rengar, you have Graves, you have Varus, you have Vex, and whichever you're focused on, that's going to be your reroll pattern. So if you're focused on Graves, do a 2-cost reroll. If you're focused on Rengar and Varus, that's a 3-cost reroll. And you could probably even just do like a regular Executioner build with like Vex as a carry at 4 costs. I haven't seen it done that much, but I'm sure it is possible. I'm sure people will figure out ways to play it. This reminds me a lot of Ambushers from last set. There was like an Echo comp that people really like to play where they ran 2 Echoes. Maybe you could do the same with Vex with this Executioner build, who knows? But in that Ambusher comp, they had like Smeech carry, they had Camille carry, they had a carry at every comp, and it's kind of the same story here. You have Graves, you have Rengar, you have Varus, and you have Vex. All these are viable right now. I think Rengar's the best, followed by Varus, followed by Graves. But if you get so many Graves in the early game, you can play Graves. If you get so many Rengars or so many Varuses, obviously play for that instead. The most important thing in this build is getting a lot of items though, because you have a full damage trait in Executioner, so that means like you want to itemize as many of your 3-stars as possible, and like when you have 4 potential carry units, that's a lot of items, and you want to focus mainly on offense. Defensive items are not as important, but if you do get them, put them on either Rhaast or a Gragas, and then with your extra unit at level 8, because we only have 7 units in right now, you just complement them with whatever trait they have. So if you're playing around Bruisers, add in a Bruiser. If you're playing around Vanguards, add in a Vanguard. But item augments are pretty good for this, just because again, you have so many people to itemize. Econ augments, while they are okay for reroll comps, I prefer not taking them because ideally you shouldn't need a econ augment in order to hit whatever reroll you're trying to go for, because I think players should only go for reroll comps that they're able to get very easily, and that means having a good start for that comp. So feel free to argue with me on that in the comments below. I'm sure some people will hard force some reroll comp anyways, but that's generally the rule. Like if you watch good players play, they typically do not take econ augments when they're doing a reroll comp unless they're very desperate, because you should only go for that comp if you have a good start for this. Also, another thing to note is that artifact items are another great way to boost this comp up a tier, because all the melee carries, they work really well with artifact items. So same items as a Shaco had. It's like Spectral Cutlass, Prowler's Claw, Death's Defiance, things like that. Next one up we have is Dynamo Misfortune. This is a 4-cost carry comp based around Misfortune, and then you could eventually go into Aurora, but it's 3 Syndicate. You put the hat on Misfortune. Leona is going to be the main carry as a Vanguard. If you get items for Kabuko later, you could go ahead and drop them on Kabuko. And then of course with Aurora, you want to put a Sejuani on your bench. That way she pulls Sejuani in and Sejuani does a big stun. There's nothing too crazy going on with this build though. Like for items, Leona, just generic tank items, literally anything will do. It could be like a Sunfire Cape, it could be a Redemption, anything works on Leona. And then for Misfortune, you want a Spear Shojin, Infinity Edge, and a Guard Breaker. This is like a pretty classic item combo on Misfortune. Helps her cast a bit with the Spear Shojin. And then the Infinity Edge is good because she's a spellcaster, and then you complement the crit with the Guard Breaker. Next up we have Aurora. Like, it's the Shojin Morello combo. She's like that champion this set. There's always a champion every set at like every cost level that works really well with Shojin Morello, and it just happens to be Aurora this time. So always build that on her because she is the best spreader of the disease from Morello. And you typically play this comp if you're playing AD flex with the Shojin. Like maybe you're going for a Xayah build with Anima Squad, but that's not quite happening, or maybe you don't get a +1 Anima emblem, and then you could decide to go into Misfortune and Dynamo instead because she uses the same exact stuff. But overall, pretty simple standard comp for level 8 4-cost builds. Next one up we have is Seraphine Techie Reroll. Very fun build based around like Seraphine 3-star, Zyra 3-star, and Poppy 3-star. I'd say Seraphine's a better carry than Zyra right now, but both of them have their place. Like obviously if you get one really quickly and you can't get the other one, like just go with that. But in a perfect world, I would choose to carry with Seraphine. Shojin Jeweled Gauntlet Guard Breaker is going to be great on her because Techie gives all the AP you need, so you don't really need like Rabadon's Death Cap or like Archangel Stab. You'd rather get the crit from Jeweled Gauntlet and then the damage amp from Guard Breaker. You could also swap it out for like a Giant Slayer. Static Shiv is also pretty nice on someone in the backline if you do not have Ionic Spark on your Poppy, but then like on Poppy, any tank item will do. I like the Stone Plate a lot though, and then doing like a solo tank, because 3-star Poppy is pretty durable. And then at level 9, you just add in 2 more Techies. If you manage to get Viego, great. Congratulations, because getting this is pretty difficult because you need a 5-cost unit, but you also need to reroll for these like 1-cost units, so it is kind of hard to do. But again, the priority is going to be Seraphine, then Poppy, then Zyra, and do the same 1-cost reroll pattern that we talked about before. Next build up we have is Exotech Reroll with Mordekaiser and Varus. You definitely need the Exotech items. Like the Exotech items say who they're good on, so you could always highlight over those items and they'll say like which unit it's recommended on. But I also have them down here, like Mordekaiser, he really likes a Corrupted Chassis. He could also use the Repulsor Lantern. Generic tank items are all the normal items, and then for Varus, he wants like the Hollow Blow or Hyper Fangs. That's gonna be really nice on him. And one common misconception is that like Varus is normally an attack damage unit, but this set he's an ability power unit. So make sure you build AP on him. Like the Jeweled Gauntlet's gonna do a lot better. Spirit Shojin's really good because he's like a caster, right? Just make sure you don't forget that. Right now, Exotech gives health and attack speed, so you don't really need to build too much attack speed in this build. You just want to focus on like AP, crit, and like the mana regeneration on your Varus. But of course, if you get an Exotech item for him, like you definitely want to use it on him because Exotech items are much more valuable than like the regular items, so you definitely want to play around that. After that, complement Varus's traits by adding in an Executioner. Like it doesn't have to be Urgot, it could be anyone. I just throw Urgot in there because he's a legendary unit. Sejuani is also a Bastion, so you could throw in any Bastion there, but Jax is also a Bastion, which is pretty nice. So you could also go like 4 Bastion in this build. I have seen that before. If you get like an Exotech +1 emblem and you get extra space, you just take out the Kabuko, put Bastion emblem on like your Mordekaiser, and then add in the 4th Bastion after that. Next up we have is going to be the Zeri Bastion build. This is a typical like Rageblade backline unit build with like a crap ton of tanks. This reminds me of Bruiser Twitch from before. Essentially all you need to do is put a Rageblade on your Zeri, put her in the backline, and then play 6 tanks. In this case we're going to do Bastion, and it works out pretty nicely because Sejuani and Zeri are both Exotech units, and same with Jax. It's very similar to the build we saw before, but instead of focusing on Varus, because this was a reroll comp focused around Mordekaiser and Varus, we focus on the 4 cost instead with Zeri and Sejuani, throw in the 6 Bastion. It works much better with +1 Bastion from the emblem, but it's not necessary. As long as you have the Rageblade, this comp is really good, and I like playing this comp in like low resource games. If you get a hack that doesn't really add too much to the game, this build is really good because you don't need too many items. Like Sejuani and Zeri are the only 2 that you care about, And also, like, you get an Exotech item, right? Because you're 3 Exotech. So you don't need like 6 items, you just need 5 items. So that means you spike a lot earlier, and the con is that you can't cap out as hard as you do with other comps. Like, obviously you could add in legendaries later, like Renekton is in this build eventually, but it's not something that's gonna like super carry you in this game. But overall, solid build, but I think Zeri is like the worst 4 cost right now, but that's not saying she's bad, she's just like slightly worse than the other ones right now. But that's gonna be all the comps that I think you should be focusing on right now. Let's just sum up at the top again. Street Demon and Anima Squad, they're being inflated right now because people don't know how to play the set yet, and that means vertical comps outperform a little bit. After that, I think Strategist Flex in the next week is probably going to be the strongest comp once people get used to playing that. Vayne Reroll is a pretty solid option if you are looking into reroll, and all the A tiers are good. They all have spots to be played in. You just have to look out for it as you flex around. But let me know down in the comments what you are looking forward to playing the most. I also have comps that I'm going to add throughout the week, such as like Golden Ox comps, Slayer comps, Veigar, Techie Reroll, Bruiser Fiddlesticks, Bronze for Life, Trade Tracker, things like that. So check the website. I'll be updating it every day, adding more and more stuff. So definitely look out for that. But hopefully you all enjoyed this video. I'm gonna be coming up with videos every single week as per usual. I have like the leveling guide coming up, probably some VOD reviews. Oh yeah, like you could submit your VODs again, like just go to the coaching section and then like fill out this form over here, and maybe you'll be featured in the next video. But that's gonna be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this, and I'll see you all next time.